Have you ever looked into your partner's eyes and realized you don't actually know who they are? That question haunted Michael every night after his wife, Claire, started whispering in her sleep. The whispers weren't words, at least not at first. They were sounds, broken syllables, strange tones, like someone trying to imitate language. But over time, the sounds began to form words, and one night, he heard her clearly whisper, "He's going to find out." Michael froze. They'd been married for 7 years, lived in a quiet Massachusetts neighborhood, the kind with trimmed hedges and nosy neighbors. Everyone adored Claire, charming, elegant, impossibly calm. People often said Michael was lucky to have her. But lately, he'd started to think luck had nothing to do with it. It started small, things in the house moving on their own. His watch would vanish from the dresser and reappear in the kitchen drawer. The cat refused to enter the bedroom. The mirrors fogged up with strange handprints when nobody had showered. And then there was the smell. A sweet, chemical odor that lingered around Claire's perfume bottles. When he asked about it, she smiled and said, "Just something new I'm trying." But the smell made his head ache. His stomach churned. He couldn't concentrate at work. One night, while she was at her yoga class, he went into her vanity. He shouldn't have. But curiosity is dangerous when mixed with fear. Inside the drawer, behind her makeup kits, he found a small brown bottle labeled in black marker. For Michael. There was no brand, no pharmacy name, just the words, handwritten, underlined twice. He felt a rush of dread so strong it nearly knocked him to the floor. He unscrewed the cap and sniffed, same sweet chemical smell. That night, he didn't sleep. He just lay there, pretending to, while Claire turned beside him and whispered again, only this time her voice wasn't calm, it was trembling. "Almost ready, just a few more days." The next morning, she was cheerful, humming as she made his breakfast. Pancakes, orange juice, everything perfect. Too perfect. He stared at the plate, then at her smile. Her eyes sparkled with that same eerie calm, but something in her face, something off, made his stomach twist. He pretended to take a bite. The moment she turned away, he scraped the food into a napkin and threw it out later. He went to work, but his mind wasn't there. He kept thinking, what if she's poisoning me? He'd read stories, wives slowly killing their husbands for insurance, inheritance, or worse. But Claire wasn't like that. She didn't need money. They were both successful. She didn't even seem to care about possessions. So why did he feel like he was being erased? That evening, when he returned home, the house was dim. Only one lamp was on, near the sofa. Claire sat there with a glass of red wine, smiling softly. "I missed you," she said, her voice low and oddly formal. "You've been distant lately." He tried to laugh it off, but his throat was dry. "Just work stress." She tilted her head, watching him. "Do you still trust me?" That question hit him like a bullet. He forced a smile. "Of course." "Good." Her smile widened. "Because I've planned something special for us this weekend. A little cabin getaway. No distractions. Just you, me, and peace." Peace. The word lingered in the air, sharp and heavy. Michael nodded, trying to appear relaxed. But deep inside, every nerve in his body screamed, "Don't go." Later that night, after she fell asleep, he checked her phone. There were no messages, no emails, everything had been deleted. But in her gallery, he found something that froze his blood. Photos of him. Sleeping. Dozens of them. In some, his face was pale. In others, his skin looked slightly discolored, like he was decomposing. But what terrified him most wasn't the photos, it was the timestamps. Some were taken weeks before he even noticed anything was wrong. He slowly looked over at Claire. She was lying on her side, smiling faintly in her sleep. And as the moonlight fell across her face, he saw something that made his heart stop. Her eyes were open. Michael didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. He lay still, forcing his breathing to remain slow and steady, pretending to be asleep as Claire's unblinking eyes remained fixed on him in the pale wash of moonlight. Hours passed, and eventually, almost imperceptibly, her eyes fluttered shut. He waited until her breathing became steady before slipping out of bed, every movement deliberate, soundless. His heart thudded so hard it seemed to echo through the walls. He went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter, trying to convince himself he was overreacting. Maybe the photos were harmless. Maybe the bottle was just vitamins. Maybe. But no. Deep down, he knew better. Something about Claire had changed. The warmth in her eyes, the spontaneity in her laugh, it was all gone. She moved like someone performing a role. A role she had memorized too well. When the first light of morning crept through the blinds, he found Claire already awake, humming softly as she packed their bags for the weekend. "You'll love it," she said with that same eerie sweetness, folding his sweaters neatly into a suitcase. "Just us. The air is so pure up there. You'll feel renewed." The word renewed made his skin crawl. He wanted to refuse, to tell her he had to work, but the way she looked at him, calm, expectant, her hands resting on the suitcase handle, made it clear there was no option but to go. And so, against every screaming instinct, he found himself sitting in the passenger seat of their silver Subaru an hour later, watching the suburbs shrink away as they drove north toward the dense forests of Vermont. The drive was quiet, suffocatingly so. The radio stayed off. Claire hummed under her breath from time to time, a tune Michael didn't recognize, low, rhythmic, and strangely off-key. Every now and then, she'd glance over at him, her lips twitching into a faint smile as if she were savoring some private thought. The deeper they drove into the countryside, the more isolated it became. Cell service dropped out somewhere past the state line. The trees thickened around the narrow road, and fog drifted across the windshield like ghostly fingers. After nearly 4 hours, Claire turned onto a gravel path leading deep into the woods. The cabin was old but beautiful, sitting on a hill overlooking a frozen lake. Its dark wood exterior looked almost black under the overcast sky. When Michael stepped out of the car, the silence hit him hard. It wasn't peaceful. It was absolute. No birds. No rustling leaves. Just the low hum of the wind threading through the trees. Claire unlocked the door and stepped inside first. The cabin smelled faintly of cedar and dust. A fire was already set in the fireplace, as if someone had been there before them. "I told you," she said, smiling, "perfect." Michael forced a grin and nodded. But unease crawled over him like static. He couldn't stop thinking about the firewood, stacked neatly, too dry to be natural. Someone had prepared this place recently. That evening, they sat by the fire, glasses of wine in hand. Claire's gaze never left him. Her tone was soft, affectionate almost, but every word seemed laced with something unspoken. "You know," she began, swirling the wine in her glass, "I think people take marriage for granted. They think they know their partner. But most of the time, they only see what they want to see." Michael nodded slowly, his throat dry. "Maybe. But sometimes people change." Her smile lingered. "Change," she repeated, tasting the word. "Yes. That's the point of marriage, isn't it? To change together." She leaned closer, the firelight flickering across her face. "Do you still trust me, Michael?" His pulse quickened. "Of course." Her eyes darkened slightly, as if that wasn't the answer she wanted. "Good," she whispered. "Because I've been working very hard, for us." The way she said working made the hair on his arms stand. He excused himself soon after and went to the bathroom, locking the door behind him. His reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed. He turned on the tap, splashing water on his face, when something in the sink caught his eye. Tiny white residue. He rubbed it between his fingers. It smelled faintly sweet. That same smell. The glass of wine. He dropped the residue instantly, his chest tightening. He wanted to vomit. Instead, he rinsed his mouth with cold water until the taste was gone. His hands shook violently as he stared at the closed door, listening. Claire's footsteps passed by in the hall, slow, deliberate. He waited 5 minutes before stepping out, forcing calm. She was sitting on the edge of the bed now, smiling again. "You look tired," she said softly. "Maybe you should rest." He nodded, pretending to yawn. When she turned off the lights, he lay still in the darkness, waiting until her breathing evened out. Then he slipped quietly out of bed and grabbed his phone. No signal. He tried again. Nothing. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The old cabin creaked with each cautious step. He found a small landline phone near the fireplace, lifted it, dead. That's when he noticed something on the mantel above the fire. A small photograph, framed in dark wood. He picked it up. His breath caught. It was them. He and Claire. But the photo wasn't old, it was recent, maybe a week ago. Except in this picture, his eyes were closed, and his skin had that same grayish tint as the photos he'd seen on her phone. He turned the frame over. On the back, in neat handwriting, were 3 words that made his knees buckle. "For the ceremony." Michael stood frozen in front of the fireplace, the photo trembling in his hand. "For the ceremony." The words pulsed in his mind, each syllable pounding in rhythm with his racing heart. What ceremony? He had never heard her mention anything like that. His hands were slick with sweat, and the flickering firelight painted the cabin walls with twisting shadows that seemed to breathe. He turned toward the bedroom door, half expecting Claire to be standing there. But she wasn't. The cabin was quiet again, too quiet. Only the slow, steady crackle of the fire broke the silence, along with the faint hiss of wind creeping through the chimney. He slipped the photo into his jacket pocket and stepped carefully down the creaking hallway. From the back of the cabin came the faint sound of something metallic clinking. He followed it, each step feeling like a countdown. The noise grew clearer, like glass tapping against glass. He reached the kitchen doorway and froze. Claire stood at the counter, her back to him. The dim yellow light from a hanging bulb revealed rows of small glass jars neatly lined up beside her. Inside each jar was a different substance: powders, dried herbs, small scraps of paper with symbols drawn on them in black ink. Her hands moved slowly, delicately, as she poured a pale liquid into one jar and stirred it with a thin metal rod. He watched in horror as she murmured under her breath. Not in English. The words were rhythmic, low, almost melodic, but there was something wrong about the sound. The air itself seemed to ripple around her as she spoke. "Claire," he whispered. She froze. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward him. Her face was calm, too calm. "You shouldn't be up," she said softly, her tone so gentle it made his stomach twist. "You need rest for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Yes," she said, setting the metal rod down. "For the ceremony. I've been preparing for months." He took a cautious step backward. What ceremony?" Claire smiled faintly, but her eyes glimmered with something cold, detached. "You'll see soon enough. It's something old, Michael. Something that existed long before love, long before marriage. A bond that doesn't break, even after death." His throat tightened. "What are you talking about?" She tilted her head, studying him like one might study an insect caught under glass. "You always said you'd love me forever, didn't you?" He nodded slowly, his pulse hammering in his ears. "Well," she said, stepping closer, "I'm just making sure you meant it." Panic clawed its way up his spine. He forced a nervous laugh, trying to sound normal. "Claire, you're scaring me. Let's just talk about this, okay? Maybe you're..." Her smile widened, and for a second, just a second, her face shifted. The skin beneath her eyes seemed to tighten, her lips stretching a little too far, her pupils darkening like ink spreading across water. "Don't lie to me," she whispered. "You've been watching me. Snooping. You found the bottle, didn't you?" Michael's blood turned to ice. She took another step toward him, and the flickering light made her shadow stretch unnaturally long across the floor. "It wasn't poison," she said softly. "It was preparation. I had to get your body ready." "My, what?" "Your body," she repeated calmly. "The human form has to be softened before it can merge. The toxins weaken the barrier. Once the ritual begins, we'll finally be one. No more secrets. No more separation. Just us." Michael stumbled backward, his heel catching on the rug. He crashed against the wall, the photo frame above him shattering. His hand brushed against a jagged shard of glass. He grabbed it instinctively. "Stay away from me," he rasped. Claire stopped, her expression melting from calm to something far more terrifying, disappointment. "You're ruining everything," she said, voice trembling. "Do you have any idea what I gave up for this?" "Claire, listen to yourself, this isn't you." Her eyes flickered with something like pain. "That's where you're wrong," she whispered. "This is me. The real me. The one you promised to love." For a moment, she looked almost human again, fragile, broken. Then, she turned sharply toward the counter and grabbed one of the jars. Inside was a thick, black liquid that seemed to move on its own, swirling like smoke trapped in glass. "Stop!" Michael shouted, lunging forward. But she moved faster. She uncorked the jar and raised it to her lips. The smell hit him instantly, a mix of decay and sweetness, like rotting fruit soaked in perfume. She drank deeply, her throat pulsing as the liquid disappeared down her neck. Then she began to change. Her body convulsed, her fingers clawing at the counter. Her skin paled, veins darkening beneath the surface. Her hair fell over her face as she let out a low, guttural sound that didn't sound human at all. Michael stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. The woman he married was dissolving before his eyes. When she finally turned to face him, her voice was no longer hers. It was layered, distorted, echoing with something ancient. "It's time, Michael," the thing wearing her skin said. "The ceremony begins at dawn." The thing that had once been Claire stood there trembling, half-shadowed in the flickering glow of the fire. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, and her skin looked translucent under the light, almost like candle wax melting and reforming, thin veins pulsing underneath. Michael couldn't breathe. His hand tightened around the jagged shard of glass, though he wasn't sure it would do anything to stop whatever she had become. "Stay back," he said, his voice barely holding steady. "I don't know what the hell this is, but it's not you, Claire." Her head jerked slightly to the side, an unnatural twitch that made his stomach drop. When she spoke, her voice sounded layered, overlapping with something deeper, something that didn't belong in a human throat. "You said you'd love me forever. You said you'd never leave me." Claire, I didn't mean." "You lied," she hissed, and for a second, her face rippled, her eyes flashing pure black. "But it's okay. After tonight, you won't be able to leave again." She lunged forward. Michael stumbled backward, knocking over a chair as he bolted for the front door. He fumbled with the lock, his fingers slick with sweat, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out everything else. Behind him came the sound of shattering glass, a guttural scream, and the thud of bare feet hitting the wooden floor. He threw the door open and ran into the cold night air, his breath forming frantic clouds in the darkness. The forest loomed ahead, towering black silhouettes swaying under a bruised sky. The ground was uneven, thick with frost, and each step sent pain shooting through his legs. He didn't dare look back. He just ran. But no matter how far he went, he could hear her. The sound of her voice, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a screech, echoed between the trees. It wasn't just behind him anymore. It was everywhere. "Michael, come back. You're not ready yet." He stumbled over a root and fell hard, the cold biting into his palms. He pushed himself up and looked around wildly. The woods were silent now, eerily still. He tried to steady his breathing. His phone. He pulled it from his pocket, desperate for a signal. Nothing. Just a dead screen and the faint reflection of his pale, terrified face. Then, behind him, a twig snapped. He turned slowly. Claire was standing there, maybe 20 feet away. Her white nightgown was soaked in black stains that glistened in the moonlight. Her hair hung in wet clumps, and her eyes, God, her eyes, were two perfect voids, reflecting nothing. But she wasn't alone. Shapes moved behind her, flickering between the trees. Dozens of them. Shadowy silhouettes with twisted limbs, some crawling, others swaying, all whispering in that same broken rhythm she had murmured in her sleep. The same chant. Over and over. He's going to find out. He's going to find out. Michael stumbled back, tripping over a rock. What are they? He gasped. Claire smiled, only it wasn't really a smile. Her mouth stretched too wide, her jaw cracking slightly at the hinge. They came before me, she said softly. Others who promised love and then forgot. The ceremony will free them. You'll help me finish it. I'm not helping you with anything, he shouted, but his voice cracked under the weight of his fear. She tilted her head. You already have. Before he could move, she lifted her hand. The air thickened instantly, cold, heavy, electric. The ground seemed to hum beneath his feet. From the forest floor rose faint trails of mist that coiled around his legs, pulling tight like ropes. He fought against them, clawing at the invisible grip that pinned him down, but the more he struggled, the tighter it became. Claire stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. It's almost dawn, she whispered. Once the sun rises, your body will no longer be your own. Michael screamed, twisting and kicking, but his body felt like it was sinking into the earth. The shadows circled closer, whispering louder now, their voices merging into a single, hollow sound that filled his skull. And then, suddenly, a blinding light sliced through the darkness, a car's headlights cutting across the trees. The spell broke. The mist vanished. The shadows recoiled like smoke in wind. Claire let out a low, animalistic snarl and turned away from the light. Michael took the chance and ran. He burst through the trees, stumbling down a dirt road. The car screeched to a stop just ahead. A man stepped out, flashlight in hand. Hey! You okay, buddy? Michael ran to him, gasping for air. Please, you have to help me. My wife, she's not human, she's... The man frowned, confused. Easy, easy. You're hurt. Let's get you in the truck. Michael turned to point toward the woods, but Claire was gone. Nothing but the wind and the faint rustle of branches. The man helped him into the passenger seat and started the engine. You staying up at the cabin? He asked. Michael nodded weakly. We were. She brought me here. The man glanced at him strangely. You mean that place up on Hollow Hill? That cabin's been empty for years. No one's lived there since. He didn't finish the sentence. Michael turned slowly toward him. Since what? The man hesitated. His voice dropped to a whisper. Since that woman burned her husband alive there. Said she was performing a ceremony to bind his soul forever. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. What was her name? The man's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Claire. And in that mirror, just for an instant, Michael saw her reflection sitting in the back seat, smiling. For a long moment, Michael couldn't breathe. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror again, but the back seat was empty now. Empty, yet the faint scent of her perfume still hung in the air, that same sickly sweet chemical smell that had haunted his every breath. His voice trembled as he turned toward the driver. Did you see her? In the mirror? The man frowned. See who? My wife, Michael rasped, his throat raw. She was sitting right there, right behind me. The driver gave him a worried look. You've been through something bad, son. You're in shock. We'll get you to the sheriff's office. They'll take care of you. But Michael barely heard him. His hands trembled uncontrollably. His skin still tingled where the mist had wrapped around his legs. The whispers in the woods still echoed faintly in his ears, even though they were miles away now. You already have, you already have. He leaned his head back, trying to breathe. Trees blurred past in the darkness, and for a while, he thought maybe, just maybe, he was safe. But then he noticed something strange. The driver kept glancing at him in the mirror. Not quick, nervous looks, but long, lingering ones. As if he was studying him. You said that cabin's been empty, Michael muttered. How do you know about it? The man hesitated. Everyone around here knows. The story goes that a woman named Claire Mitchell lived there with her husband. No one saw them much. Then one night, people smelled smoke. The fire department came too late. They found the husband's body, or what was left of it, burned beyond recognition. But her body was never found. Michael's breath hitched. Mitchell. That's right. The man glanced at him again. Why? Because that's my last name, Michael whispered. The driver's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. For a few seconds, the only sound was the hum of the tires against the road. Then, slowly, the man said, What did you say your name was again? Michael Mitchell, he whispered. Claire Mitchell was my wife. The driver's eyes flicked to him, wide now. That can't be. That fire was over 40 years ago. Michael stared at him. The world seemed to tilt. What? The driver nodded nervously. I'm telling you the truth. 1985, the sheriff told me himself. No one's lived in that cabin since then. It's condemned property. Michael felt his body go numb. He turned toward the window, watching the trees slide by, but everything outside looked wrong, darker somehow, blurred at the edges. His own reflection stared back at him in the glass. Pale. Hollow-eyed. There was something strange about it too, like the reflection wasn't following his movements exactly. He lifted his hand. The reflection lagged behind. Stop the car, he whispered. What? I said stop the damn car, he shouted, and before the driver could react, Michael grabbed the steering wheel. The truck swerved violently, tires screeching on the gravel road, and slammed into a ditch. The airbags exploded, filling the cab with dust and the sharp tang of smoke. Michael shoved the door open and stumbled out into the cold. The forest surrounded him again, the wind slicing through his clothes. Behind him, the driver groaned, calling out for help, but Michael barely heard him. He looked down at his shaking hands, his fingernails were turning gray. His veins were darkening beneath the skin. He stumbled toward the treeline, desperate to get away, to wake up from whatever nightmare he'd fallen into. The woods felt alive now, whispering, pulsing, breathing. Every shadow seemed to move. Every gust of wind carried faint, broken words. Almost ready, just a few more days. He fell to his knees. His vision swam. And then, through the blur, he saw her, standing just ahead in the clearing. Claire. Her nightgown fluttered in the wind, untouched by the cold. Her eyes glowed faintly, her expression soft, almost tender. Michael, she whispered, stepping closer. You're so tired. Let me help you. He shook his head weakly. You're not real. You died. You burned. She smiled. So did you. The world fell silent. Michael froze. What? She reached out her hand. You never left that cabin, Michael. You think you escaped, but you didn't. You can't. You've been reliving that night again and again. I told you, the ceremony binds us forever. He stumbled back, shaking his head violently. No, I got out. There was a man, a truck. Her smile widened. You created him. You created the road. The forest. Everything. Because your mind refuses to accept the truth. Behind her, the trees began to shimmer, their shapes twisting like smoke. The world around him started to dissolve. The smell of smoke and perfume filled the air. He turned, and saw the cabin again. Whole. burning softly from the inside, just as it had that night. Through the flames, he could see himself, lying on the floor, pale and still, eyes open. His own body. "No," he whispered. Claire moved beside him, her voice a soft echo in his ear. "It's time to stop running, love. The ceremony is complete. You belong with me now." The ground beneath him began to split, glowing with faint red light. He tried to fight it, to scream, but his voice was gone. The last thing he saw before the world went completely black was Claire's face, calm, smiling, perfect, leaning close to whisper one final truth. "I told you, Michael. Love never dies." When the police finally reached Hollow Hill the next morning, all they found were ashes. The old cabin had collapsed completely. Inside the ruins, 2 bodies were discovered, one male, one female, holding each other so tightly that the firefighters had to pry them apart. Both were burned beyond recognition. But in the soot-covered remains, investigators found something else. A small glass bottle. Labeled, in neat handwriting. "For Michael."